This is Venezuela, and on January 3rd, 2026, the United States invaded it. Not with ground troops, not with tanks rolling across borders, but with something far more dramatic. At 2:00 a.m., more than 150 U.S. military aircraft launched from 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere. Navy SEAL helicopters flew into Venezuelan airspace at just 100 feet above the water to avoid radar detection. Then the lights went out. U.S. cyber warfare took down Venezuela's entire power grid. Bombs hit Venezuela's air defense systems. The largest military complex in Caracas erupted in flames. And elite special forces stormed the presidential compound with one mission: capture Nicolás Maduro. But before we get into how this operation unfolded and what it means, hit subscribe. This story is still developing, and you'll want to follow what happens next. So how did we get here? How did the United States end up kidnapping a sitting head of state? Let's rewind. July 2024. Venezuela holds a presidential election. Maduro claims victory. The opposition says he stole it. So does the United States. So does most of the international community. But the U.S. already had a plan. Since 2020, there's been a federal indictment against Maduro, charging him with narco-terrorism. The reward for his capture? $50 million. Trump takes office in January 2025. And immediately, things escalate. August 2025. The CIA sends a covert team into Venezuela. Their mission? Track Maduro's every move. September. Operation Southern Spear begins. The U.S. floods the Caribbean with warships and aircraft, officially for counter-narcotics. Unofficially, a show of force. Between September and December, the U.S. conducts 35 airstrikes on boats allegedly carrying drugs from Venezuela. At least 115 people are killed. November, the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's most advanced aircraft carrier, sweeps into the Caribbean. Late December, Trump calls Maduro directly. "You got to surrender." Behind the scenes, U.S. Special Forces are training on a full-scale replica of Maduro's compound. They know every room, every door, every exit. January 2nd, 2026. Trump gives the final order. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time, Operation Absolute Resolve is a go. Caracas, 2:00 a.m. local time. The city is asleep. Then it begins. Air defenses destroyed. Power grid collapses. Helicopters land at the compound. In just 30 minutes, U.S. forces have Maduro. He fell while trying to flee, injuring himself. His wife was struck in the head during the raid. By 4:29 a.m., just 2.5 hours after the operation began, Maduro is aboard the USS Iwo Jima. Hours later, he's on a plane to New York. 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Maduro lands at Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York. The White House posts a video. Maduro in handcuffs, walking down a hallway with a carpet reading DEA NYD. The caption, "Perp walked." Monday, January 5th. Maduro appears in federal court. "I was captured at my home in Caracas. I am a prisoner of war." He's charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapons offenses. The judge orders him held until at least March 17th. Maduro is now in a U.S. jail. And Trump? He announces something unprecedented. "We are going to run Venezuela." Not support, not assist. Run. Trump says a team of U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, will govern Venezuela directly. Until when? He doesn't say. How long? Nobody knows. But here's the cost. At least 100 people killed in the raids, dozens more injured. Cuba announces 32 Cubans died protecting Maduro. Venezuelan civilians caught in the crossfire, homes destroyed. Linda Unamuno, a public worker, described an explosion so powerful it destroyed her roof. The day after the raids, Caracas was eerily quiet. Stores closed, roads empty, people terrified. January 5th, the UN Security Council convenes emergency session. Russia and China demand Maduro's release. They call it military aggression, a violation of international law. The US rejects that. They call it a targeted law enforcement measure to arrest an indicted fugitive. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns of dangerous precedent and says rules of international law have not been respected. Democratic Senator Mark Warner asks the critical question, does this mean any large country can indict the ruler of a smaller adjacent country and take that person out? That's the precedent. If the US can do this to Venezuela, what stops Russia from doing it to Georgia? What stops China from doing it to Taiwan's leadership? Inside the US, reactions are divided. Republicans celebrate. Representative Mario Diaz-Balart says the first of those tyrannies has not survived President Trump. He warns Cuba and Nicaragua are next. Democrats are split. Some praise Maduro's removal but worry about what comes next. Progressives are furious. Protests erupt in Times Square. Signs read, "Hands off Venezuela," and "No blood for oil." Because that's the other story. Oil. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, 300 billion barrels. For decades, Venezuelan oil was off-limits to US companies due to sanctions. But now, Trump is already meeting with oil CEOs to discuss investing $100 billion in Venezuela's oil industry. The International Monetary Fund unfreezes $5 billion in Venezuelan assets to rebuild the economy. Translation: prepare Venezuela for American investment. Venezuela's new interim president is Delcy Rodriguez, the former vice president. But here's what's interesting. Her brother Jorge Rodriguez held secret talks with the US in 2025 about her leading a post-Maduro government. This wasn't improvised. This was coordinated regime change with a pre-selected replacement. The Venezuelan opposition, led by Edmundo Gonzalez, who claims he won the July election, supports Maduro's removal, but notably doesn't endorse US occupation. Inside Venezuela, reactions are mixed. Maduro supporters protest, but across borders in Colombia, Lima, Buenos Aires, Venezuelan exiles celebrate in the streets. So what happens now? 3 scenarios. Scenario 1. The US successfully transitions Venezuela to a stable democracy. American companies invest. Oil flows. Venezuela rebuilds. Trump claims victory. Probability? Low. Venezuela is deeply divided. Rebuilding takes decades, not months. Scenario 2. Venezuela descends into chaos. Militias fill the power vacuum. Violence spreads. Neighboring countries get dragged in. The US owns the failure. Probability? Medium. This is the nightmare scenario. Scenario 3. The US stays for years. Direct or indirect occupation. Venezuela becomes a puppet state. American military presence becomes permanent. Probability? Also medium-high. This might be Trump's actual plan. And what about Trump's hints at targeting Cuba and Nicaragua next? If this operation succeeds, he might try again. If it fails spectacularly, those plans die. The international fallout is already massive. Russia and China are furious. European allies are nervous. Latin American countries are divided. Legal scholars debate whether this violates international law. The UN Charter prohibits military aggression against sovereign states. The US argues this was law enforcement, not invasion. But that's a very thin line. This isn't the first time the US has intervened in Latin America. Panama 1989. Grenada 1983. Countless covert operations. But this is different. Trump didn't just support regime change. He announced the US would directly govern Venezuela. That's not intervention. That's occupation. How long will it last? What will Venezuela look like in 6 months? A year? 5 years? Nobody knows. What we do know is this: Trump just made the biggest foreign policy gamble of his presidency. If Venezuela stabilizes and becomes a U.S. ally with flowing oil, he looks like a genius. If it collapses into chaos, kills thousands, and drags on for years, it becomes Trump's Iraq. The world is watching. Allies are nervous. Adversaries are calculating. On January 3, 2026, the United States invaded Venezuela, captured its president, and announced it would run the country. What happens next will define Trump's legacy and possibly reshape how superpowers interact with smaller nations. If this changed how you see U.S. foreign policy, subscribe. Drop a comment. Was this justified or a dangerous precedent? Share this with someone who needs to understand what just happened, because this is the kind of story that changes everything. See you next time.